All right, Hilltop Saw Shop Tools, Phase 2. And where I'm going with this is developing this lever concept attached to a threaded rod into a sort of a multi-tool for assembling cases. Again, the inspiration was these things. Husqvarna has sold these for a long time, and I've used these for a long time. And I always, like I had said in my first video, always found it a little bit awkward where I had to have both hands, you know, somehow dealing with the tool, whether it's holding on to something to hold the threaded rod itself or another tool working the nut. And you know, sometimes that gets a little awkward. It's not so awkward, it's not doable. Of course, this has been done 1,000 times. I've done it for years. But I was looking, I'm getting older, you know. So I was looking for a way to make that operation simpler for me. And what I wanted to do was to have one hand free. So that's really the genesis of this whole concept right here, is have a long enough handle attached to the puller where I can have one hand on the case and another hand on the wrench. And this is what I came up with as a solution, and it works for me, you know. And with the longer handle, it really takes away, like if it's short, it'll want to jack that thing up when things get a little bit tight. With the longer handle, you really don't have to stress the system that very hard. Plus, with the finer thread, it's even less effort with the wrench to make things move. Maybe not quite as fast, but it's less torque around the whole system with the finer thread. So the combination of the longer handle and the finer thread makes this a whole lot easier for me to manipulate when I start getting into where it's actually really pulling. You know what I'm saying? So that's what I was trying to get to, and I believe I've succeeded with this. Part of the deal of having a fixed handle is getting it on and off. So being able just to flip it out like that, to both thread it on and thread it off, makes it easier. So all my systems now have the fine thread and the harder rod. And the reason I wanted the fine thread and harder rod was twofold. One, the finer thread, like I said, reduces the amount of torque required to operate the puller. But also I wanted better wear characteristics, because I don't want to make these every time I do a saw. I want these to last for my service life, as I had said once before. But the other thing is, now that I have a larger system and a longer threaded rod, it opens up the tool concept of doing other tasks. And, well, I mean, in addition to the flywheel side, notice I used the bushing here to set right inside where it pushes on the case, right in that section right here, which is pretty stable, versus up here somewhere else. But the thing is with these bushings and the concept, I mean, if I wanted to, I could have the bushing where it sets out here, just make it a larger diameter and, you know, recess it, and I could have it sit out there for a puller. The concept with the bushings is you can make each one fit each application, each saw. And for the 660s, I chose to go this way, as you just saw, but also for the PTO side, the larger diameter, again, what you can do with the bushing here is make that diameter a little smaller so it supports the seal, won't let it invert when it sets like that, plus large enough to get to the outer race, which is pretty solid. So now it looks something like this. You know, and that's how that go on there. Of course, the handle goes here. But also, now that I have the longer distance to work with, this tool is going to be phase 3. This is phase 2. Phase 3 is going to get a couple of things, and this is a preview. One, instead of having a bolt, nut and bolt arrangement to hold these on the handle, I'm going to put a pin. So it's easy to change from one to the next. All I have to do is pull the pin and put the other one right in there. That's phase 3. But also phase 3 is, since I've got the length, I've got the leverage, and I've got the wear characteristics, I'm going to do something that these Husqvarna tools never could do. And that's start installing the bearings. So basically what we're going to do is this. Fit in here like it does when I'm pulling the crank. Instead of pulling the crank, I'm going to pull a bearing using a larger diameter inside bushing, that when I pull the bearing tight, this goes flush to the inside of the case. The bolt goes through the bearing and into the tool this way. I'll have the bolt be able to reach through the case. The case will be right here, obviously, like like this. And this bushing here will be a larger diameter than the outside race of the bearing, so that when I tighten this as much as I can from the inside and then turn around and do the same operation, I'll be able to pull that whole assembly right through to where this goes flush to the inside of the case and that bearing is now installed. So phase 3 is going to go from just pulling the crank through the bearings and then using bushings for the special applications, be it with seals or no seals. We're going to go to actually installing the bearings with the same tool. So we're going to expand the capabilities of the set, largely because I have the extra length now to work with. As I had said before, I like the length to be able to move away from the saw some when I'm working on it, but that also gives me the ability of doing more tasks. So phase 3 is going to be installing bearings. That'll be the next video. Phase 4 is, instead of having a flat bushing like this, when the cases are split, is I'm going to have a cup, kind of like a socket cup, where yet again I can reach through to the outside with a smaller bushing that goes to the inside race of the bearing and actually pull the bearing out of the case into the cup using the very same tool. So this tool will be used for not just pulling cranks through bearings to put the cases together, or pulling the crank through a bearing for a case assembly, but it's going to also be used to assemble bearings in the cases and pull bearings out of the cases. That'll be phase 4. Hope you're interested. If you are, stay tuned. But I guess the highlights of phase 2 is a harder material, finer threads, better wear characteristics. This, of course, is for the MS660, and adding a set of bushings. I guess I've got 4 sets of bushings for the different saws. I've got these for the 385, 390s. I've got 372s. I've got ones that are like sleeves for getting to the inner race of the bearing, and I've got the 038 done. And they're all done with the fine thread now. I'm not using any of the lower grade coarse thread because wear characteristics, and because I'm going to apply this to more tasks. I want the leverage. I want the effort to be low. I'll sacrifice speed for control. I'll sacrifice speed for longer life, and for that matter, I actually need to have the threads this way, I believe, for the wear characteristics. I need a harder material. So, Farmer Jones, Shop Tools, phase 2, and if you're interested, phase 3. And if you're interested, stay tuned for phase 3 when we start applying this to bearings, both the installation and removal. Talk to you later. Bye for now. Hope you enjoy. I think also this is part of my Atlas lathe series. Is what I guess I'm trying to do is show the things you can do when you have the lathe. The lathe to me is almost a hobby as well. The chainsaws is the main event, but the chainsaws gave me a reason to justify having the lathe, not just for doing pop-ups and stuff like that. I had done that one video where I was building fixtures for chucking up pistons to do pop-ups with a lathe, and building arbors to allow me to trim the bases of the cylinders. But now we're applying that same lathe to some of the other basic functions you do when you're playing this game, this hobby, and that's coming up with a sort of a generic assembly tool. I guess the only part of this which is not done on a lathe is these handles, and I'm struggling with that. I'm going to come up with either a source of handles that are easy for a guy to do, because you can't build that on a lathe, or I'm going to make a fixture for these bar stocks where I just set the bar stock in a fixture, then either use a saw or a grinder so I can cut them the same way. But like I said, this is going to go away too. This is going to have a pin. So this whole system is going to evolve, and hopefully this gives you an idea as how it's going to evolve and where it's going to go. And what I want to have with the I've already done it with the 660s, but I want to evolve it to the other saws, is have one system that does all the things you need to do to assemble and disassemble and repair the crank and bearings on these saws. And right now I've done that with the 660s, and almost there with the 372, 385s, but the concept is pretty clear. You got this jack, right? Use the damn thing. If I didn't have the hand free to sort of help center this, it's a pain in the ass. Oh, I'm sorry, it's a pain. So by having the attached handle, it really makes it easier to apply the concept to other tasks. But when I had these kind of tools, just because it was fairly awkward to manipulate these tools with the different pieces, it makes it hard for me to have a hand free to do things like align this bushing and bearing when I want to do that installation. The reason why I'm not showing phase 3 is because I did it with this, but I didn't like it because I wanted to sort of self-center the bearing. So I'm going to turn one of these up where it actually has the bushing sit on the inside of the bearing as well. So it basically self-centers the bearing as I'm beginning to squeeze it into the cases. And I have, again, less things I have to do with my hands. And that's really the whole key to this whole system, is coming up with concepts where it reduces the chances of having things fall apart in your hands or slipping, and making it easier to do those relatively critical operations because you actually have more hands free. In this case, 50% more, because I have one hand free because of this darn handle. Am I repeating myself? But that's what the Genesis is. I mean, obviously these work. I love them. Use them for a long time. But for me, this is actually a better concept, and it's more flexible. And as I evolve the set, as I've told you, and you start seeing it, you can understand why. See, I'm making a plug for a lathe. Why it makes sense to have a lathe if you have a hobby like this. See? And then people will be interested in doing lathe type work like I am. Because like I said before, finding reasons to use that lathe is just as much of a hobby as finding reasons to build saws to me. Now, I know that may be, redneck and crazy, but see, these guys had a nut on the end and all that kind of stupid shit. I like my handle. What else is there to say? The tooling is coming in too. I ordered a bunch of stuff online, and I ordered them in carbide too because I want to make a few of these. The aluminum cut's pretty easy, but the harder bar stock that I've got, that's pretty tough. And I actually got some chromoly bar stock. Where is it? Over here somewhere. This stuff here is harder yet. Well, I'll let that wait. There's a reason why we're going to do that. That'll be phase 5 in the tool set. But for right now, there's phase 2.